Hello and good morning, everyone. So give me 30 seconds. I'm so excited to be joined by one of my very good friends, Dr. Shawna Darou. I hope I said that right, hon. I'm so bad
absolutely.
with names. And today we're going to have a really, what I feel is an incredibly important conversation for women, because in the experience that I've had with working, particularly with the female factor in the last 6 and a bit years, the one common denominator that often gets overlooked and missed is our hormone cycle. And, common perception is that hormones are, directly related to our period, which is just such a scraping the surface, really, of what hormones do for us as women. So Shawna and I are going to have a really awesome conversation just to help you to be more aware about the importance of your hormone cycle and what to look for and what you can do if tracking your hormones is something that feels like it's the right step for you. So good morning. I can see we've got Maggie online. Hey, Maggie. So Shawna, thank you so much for joining us for our live interview chat.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here. Talking about hormones is my favorite thing to do.
Which is also why, you are the go-to girl. So I want to give 2 seconds and I want to try and share this live video stream across a couple of different platforms. So okay. While I'm doing that, Shawna, would you like to introduce yourself and maybe share with the audience a little bit about your past and why you're so passionate about hormones and how it can really empower a woman when she knows all about her hormones?
Yeah, certainly. So I'm a naturopathic doctor in Toronto in Canada, and I have been a naturopath for 15 years now with a focus almost entirely on women's health and hormones. And I have to say I honestly fell into it by accident, but it's absolutely become my passion. And hormones are the inroad to self-compassion. They affect everything that we do. They affect how you think and how you feel and how you connect. So it's something that has a profound effect on life when they're in balance, and also an equally profound effect when they're out of balance. So my work in clinic is mostly dealing with hormone imbalances, but that's not what we're going to be talking about today. What I'm really excited to share with you today is how tracking your cycle and learning about yourself can be one of the most empowering things that you do as a woman. And that's the part that I want to open the discussion for.
So let's start talking about, let's start on I don't want to say the word negative, but maybe the most overlooked aspect of hormones and how that has a real compound effect on women's well-being in general.
Well, the conversation is all painted negative. So we have, difficult periods and they're painful, and we've got PMS. And really, for most of us, that's all that we focus on is how bad our cycles are. Mm-hmm. And we're really missing the fact that there are more positive days than negative, and that all of the things that we love most about ourselves also fluctuate through the month too. And we're not taught that. We're barely taught how our bodies work. We're usually just shown how to use appropriate birth control. And that's a whole other discussion as well.
It is. I remember, and I say this to my clients all the time when I start to introduce them to the concept of hormone cycles. I remember being at school, suffering from, cramping before a period came, and my PE teacher, my personal education teacher, saying to me, Bree, cramps are just part and parcel of being a woman. You just push through them. So go for a run. The more you exercise in this state where your body is cramping, the better the cramps will feel. So off you go for a run around the oval. And I remember thinking that just does not feel right to me. Like, my body is telling me clearly that it needs to stop, and yet the advice is to don't listen to your body, go for a run instead. And it's advice that nearly every single woman can relate to, because we were all taught that from that, that period side of things, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. We're not taught to talk about it, to ask for help, to ask for what we need. And, it's either you just push through and ignore it, or I was reading a couple of studies last week where it's extremely common for women to cancel on events and, social things because they're on their period as well. So, there's a lot of dysfunction in our society about how we view this. And every woman goes through this. It's kind of wild.
Did you know there's also reports? So when they go back and look at the admittance of women being admitted into mental care hospitals, for instance, it's something like 80% of women that are admitted in their PMS part of their cycle.
Wow.
Which, and it's so funny. And I say, obviously my expertise is in the female brain. And I was reading, again, some research the other day, and it was only in 1993 that the National Institute of Health mandated studies to be done on female brains. The reason that it wasn't normal for female brains to be studied up until that point was because it was too expensive, because our hormone cycles were too unpredictable.
Oh, man, but they're very predictable, and that's the thing.
And they're a part of who we are. Without our hormones have a direct connection with our brain and the way that our brain functions and processes things. So why wouldn't it be included in studies that were specific for women? It's part of who we are. And I guess that's why I'm so excited to have this conversation today, because like you say, we don't talk about our hormone cycle anywhere near as often as we should. And when we do, it's often passed off as, just you use PMS as an excuse for your behaviour. Yeah, that's right. Instead of this is part of who we are. So how do we start to speak about this and live life in more flow with our hormones, rather than feeling like it's just an excuse for bad behaviour, or it's just an excuse for feeling out of whack?
Well, we start by tracking it and learning our own patterns and fluctuations. And you'd be amazed at how many things do move with your cycle that you weren't aware of. So I find that, in general, we're pretty hard on ourselves for not being consistent day to day. So not being able to hold a consistent intention or focus or goal. And we're just not wired that way. So we're wired to view the world through a different lens at different points in our cycle, depending on what the hormones are doing. And the sooner we can embrace that, the more powerful we can be, because then we're not working against our cycles all the time. So, the big take home is that, as a woman, you're not the same every day of the month. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think that that's actually the key to female leadership. And that's the key to, success in business. And that's the key to connection, is to know who you are and where you are in your cycle and not use it as an excuse anymore. So
I want to talk about tracking. Can you give some examples of what a period cycle looks like? Because I know that there's specific phases, and I know when women start to track, firstly, how does a woman start to track? How would you encourage, if someone has no idea what their cycle looks like, because maybe they don't get a period, whether they're on a contraception pill that stops them from getting a period, or something like the Mirena, that IUD, or maybe they've had a hysterectomy, so they don't cycle from the normal perspective. How would someone start tracking their cycle, and why would they want to start doing that?
Well, I'm actually going to take a step back first to women who do have a predictable cycle, and start there, and then talk about how we can extend that to women who have an irregular cycle or have the Mirena or hysterectomy. Because if we can understand what the hormones are meant to be doing, it's easier to recognize the patterns in the other circumstances too.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I want to start with is that there are some patterns to look for, but we all express them differently. So I don't like getting too hung up on, this is the phase where you're supposed to be creative and amazing at brainstorming, and this is the phase that you're supposed to be really strong, because those are potential patterns, but it's most important to know what your own patterns are. For example, and then they do shift, through different decades of your life as well. They get, more exaggerated in perimenopause, so I found, and at puberty, similar kind of thing, as the, hormones are sort of tapering in and tapering out. the amplitude of the changes gets harder to miss. So there's, 4 main phases of the cycle, and I, like to name them by their biological names, but other people have named them differently. So we first got your menstrual phase, and that's where if you are getting periods, you're menstruating. And this is the phase where your estrogen level is slowly starting to rise, but it's also, right when your period starts, it's the time where your hormones are at their lowest. And at that point, we feel a bit more, tired, a bit more vulnerable, which again, if you can recognize that that's the state you're in, you can use it for, for a positive influence in your life rather than a negative. The next phase is the follicular phase, and this is where, before you ovulate, where your estrogen levels are rising and they reach their peak. And this tends to be where most women feel their best in terms of having, focus and communicating clearly and, having more physical strength and a stable mood. So most people identify that as their favorite part of their cycle, although I would challenge that as you start tracking things.
I agree.
Yeah. The next phase is the ovulatory phase, and this is where you ovulate. And during this phase, there's a lot of hormonal action again. So your egg is being released, but also your estrogen is dropping and your progesterone is rising. So it can be a phase where you're more emotionally sensitive, although again, most people generally feel quite good during this phase in terms of the positive aspects of ovulation, where we connect really well and we experience more pleasure and we're sort of more dynamic in our relationships. And then the last phase of the cycle is called the luteal phase. And this is, what's also called the PMS phase. Although for me, this is actually my favorite phase of the cycle, and I can get into that a bit more. But this is where your progesterone reaches its peak and then it declines. This is, where women tend to experience more fluctuations in their mood and emotions. But it's also a time where you are most productive and focused and able to get stuff done in general. So again, we can sort of learn to ride the waves of our cycle in a way that we're sort of embracing the positive and learning to navigate the negative.
Which is ultimately what we want, and the purpose of your programs and you working with women the way you do, and the purpose of the way that I work with women is to do exactly that. It's to give women the self-compassion and the understanding to recognise that there is a cycle to you being female, and your hormones are part of why we're not men. We don't just flatline and then maintain this level-headedness throughout our lifetime. We are incredibly cyclic women. And what I loved about what you said is you've got, your favourite phase is the PMS phase, which I totally want to explore, because most women would go, oh my God, like that is the worst. My favourite phase is actually, at the absolute bottomed out, pieced out period zone, because it gives me the time to just completely tune out and come back to me. And again, I know a lot of women go, really, you love having your period? Yeah, I do. It's a nurturing and self-love part of the month. And I was reading the other day, we live in a man's world where it's 5 days on for work, 2 days off for a weekend, 5 days on for work, 2 days off for a weekend. That is very traditionally set up for men. Women, we tend to have that 3 weeks on, 5 days off. And the 5 days off, generally aligns with when your estrogen progesterone levels would be at their lowest, so your period cycle. So, okay, Christina, we're going to come back to questions. Christina's got an awesome question, and so does Gwen, actually. So let me read them to you, actually, Shawna. Okay. That way we won't miss anything. So firstly, Gwen has said, I love being over 8 years past the cycle. I would love to know your feedback on past the cycle, because I work with a lot of women that have gone through menopause, and they say, well, hormones are no longer relevant for me. I don't have a hormone cycle, and I'd love to know your feedback on past the cycle. And Gwen, thank you so much for saying that, because I think this is a really common misperception that when you go through menopause, everything just shuts up shop. And secondly, Christina has said, what's the cause of not having the regular period and then missing it for a few months? Not sure if this question is relevant here.
Okay.
So let's start with Christina. I'll pop Christina's question up on the screen. So it's, what's the cause of not having the regular period and then missing it for a few months? Not sure if this is relevant.
So it depends on the circumstance. So if you're not on a hormonal contraceptive, then there's some degree of hormone imbalance going on if the periods are not coming monthly. Now, regular could fluctuate. So it could be a cycle coming anywhere from like 24 to 35 days apart. If they're further apart than that, then as a naturopathic doctor, I would test hormones to try to figure out what's going on. There's a lot of causes of skipping periods. One of them could be stress. One of them could be low body fat. It could be polycystic ovarian syndrome. But understanding what's the cause is really, really relevant here. Now, even if you're skipping, your hormones are still activating through the month. They're rarely flatlined, except in a few cases, and that would be, an extreme stress response, or if a woman is very underweight, though in those cases, the hormones are quite static. But that sort of leads me into Gwen's question, or Gwen's comment here, where even, past the dramatic swings of estrogen and progesterone, I still think that our brains are wired to cycle. And those cycles often will follow the lunar cycle after menopause, or they might follow your own sort of, your own fluctuating ebb and flow. The lunar cycle, interestingly, matches up quite nicely. So, for example, there's a bit of controversy as to whether people see the full moon as being ovulation or menstruation. I personally see it as menstruation, and that's not the standard view out there. But energetically, it makes more sense to me that, during the full moon is where, before the full moon is where our emotions tend to amplify. And in an astrological world, the full moon is where you release things. And it's just how I think of menstruation as well, of the, release and replenish phase. So, following how your mood and productivity and your state varies with the lunar cycle would be interesting. Post-menopause, it might be a bit more subtle, but it might not. I think we're just wired to be cyclic in nature.
I absolutely love that you've said that, and I back it 120%. This is, so in line with my research and with my training. The female brain is wired to cycle, and our hormones are just a part of that. So every aspect of who we are as women, and I know that you can agree with this, the way that we communicate throughout the month, our ability to express ourselves clearly and also to retain information, our energy levels, our sleep cycles, our bathroom habits, all of, almost every part of who we are as women can be linked back to the fluctuations of hormone flow. So, great questions, girls. Thank you so much for the contribution. I'm going to keep working through here. So you said, and I'll pop these questions up in a moment, you said that PMS, the PMS phase, and we're going back to just the regular cycle right now. I do want to really explore what life looks like without a period, because there's a lot of women that fall under that category. But for the women who do experience a traditional cycle, what makes PMS your favourite? You and I have had a number of conversations about turning the perception of PMS around. So why do you love the PMS cycle?
So in general, like aside from myself, I love it because it means that you're paying attention. It means that you're noticing that things are cycling and there's a pattern. So that's, step one is noticing that, that your state is changing. Personally, I really like that phase because I have incredible focus and concentration for about 5 days during my PMS phase that I can get ridiculous amounts of things done. And for me, I like that state. It's like it's in the flow, and I don't talk myself out of things as easily. I also think that the PMS phase, there's a bit less of a filter, and things that need to be changed and shifted in our life get big and magnified and in our faces. And sometimes that can be a good thing. We're more able to take risks and, articulate our needs. That being said,
it's a no-nonsense phase.
That's no nonsense, yeah. But I also just want to put it out there that, you know, there are cases where PMS is extreme, disabling, and, you know, causes severe depression and anxiety. And for me, those are markers of hormone imbalance and not a PMS that you should have to embrace, right? So I just do want to put that out there, because I do work with a lot of women who do suffer in this phase when their hormones are out of balance, especially if their progesterone levels are too low, or they're not detoxing estrogen properly, or there's a lot of stress going on in their lives. It can get a bit out of control. So I would say in a case of balanced hormones, it can be quite a phenomenal part of the cycle.
Absolutely. And I think just to add to that as well, when your PMS symptoms are really extreme to that level, where anxiety or stress or depression even is quite noticeable, a lot of the time that can also be connected to an epigenetic inherited emotional state. So again, this is why it's so important for we as women to work with the female brain and to work with the emotional triggers and in conjunction with our hormones. It's never just just work on your hormones and expect your emotional state to be fixed, or just work on your emotional state and expect your hormones to balance out. It's a holistic approach that needs both, particularly when your emotions and hormones are all over the shop.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we've got another question from Gwen. So she's said, let me just pop it up. Hormones are still relevant. Lack of progesterone, I've been told, can make your body act like you have diabetes without it showing in blood work. Do you have any insight on that, Shawna? Good question, Gwen.
Yeah, that is a good one. Yes and no. So yes, if the rest of the hormonal system is out of balance, and especially if the adrenal glands are depleted, then a lack of progesterone can cause a lot of issues in the body, ranging from blood sugar dysregulation to, to insomnia and, poor stress response. But I hesitate to say that as a generalization, because we are designed to have a drop in our estrogen and progesterone post-menopause, not to constantly supplement and support it. And post-menopause estrogen levels, if tested, should be extremely low, meaning, on a blood test, less than a level 5. So I really don't believe in design flaws in our anatomy. I believe that our body does things for a good, smart reason. And if there are issues with blood sugar that have gotten triggered by the start of menopause, then we need to look at the insulin resistance and the stress response and all of the surrounding hormones there too, along with nutrition, of course, because the progesterone was just keeping it, in the flow while the body was menstruating before.
Absolutely love what you've just said, and that and I'm not going to use your words right here. What did I say verbatim? When you said you don't believe in designed hormone cycles. So, and I can't remember the exact words you said. You said something along the lines of, I don't believe in intervention, like in changing. And I think this is where a lot of us as women, we fall under that trap of, let's not embrace the hormone cycle. Instead, let's manipulate it so that we have less of a hormone cycle, less of an obvious signs and symptoms to make our life easier with, the introduction of things like the pill and, hormone replacement for when someone is going through perimenopause and menopause. Instead of just allowing the body to do what it is naturally designed to do, we manipulate it to try and make life easier, instead of looking at it as, okay, well, how do we take what is already natural and normal and make it easier as a result of who we are? Yeah. I love that. I love that you said that.
Yeah. And sometimes I do recommend hormones when it's so bumpy that we need to get a bit of stability to work on the underlying imbalances, but not as a long-term strategy.
No, nothing is a long-term strategy.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the normal cycle for someone who has a period that shows on a regular basis. What about for all of those women out there that don't have a period as a indicator for where they are in their cycle? How would they start to track their cycle? What would they be looking for?
Well, what I usually recommend starting with is starting with looking for, I call them gifts and struggles. So 3 things that you really love about yourself that you think fluctuate through the month. So, you know, I think we all notice that sometimes we connect with people really easily, or sometimes we just have like boundless energy, or some days we really want to exercise. So things that are relevant for you. So choosing 3 things that you would love to have a bit more access to knowing when they pop up in your month, and also picking 3 struggles, meaning, you know, it could be, you know, anxiety or sleeplessness or getting cramps or feeling bloated or having unreasonable food cravings. So just picking.
And can I throw something in there as well for 3 things that you don't like? Also throw in your walk will be more prominent in one part of your month than it will be in other parts of your month. You'll be more sort of consumed by negativity. So that's another thing to look for.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you just mark it on a calendar, or you could use a period tracking app if you're up for it, but simply on a calendar, just, you know, color coding or writing the words in, just looking for those 6 things in the month will give you a really good idea of how those are fluctuating. And again, like, it's relevant for you. You know, somebody who, you know, works in finance may not really care when their peak creativity comes up, but they want to know when they can get their work done and when their focus is good and when to book their meetings and when to give presentations. So, you know, make sure it's relevant for you, because this is how you really tap into your own power, which I think is like the best part of all of this. Amen.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So with, you said earlier about I think you said you referred to decade cycles. I refer to them as life phases, where, you know, we've got the influx of puberty, and we know that puberty is traditionally a really out of sorts cycle. Can you talk a little bit more, because I know that there are women of all different ages watching this and watching the replay. Can you talk a little bit more about what to look for in regards to traditional life phases, so that they're more aware of maybe what a cycle could look like for them?
Sure. So our peak hormone balance typically happens in our 20s. So that's usually when you would notice a hormonal cycle that is, you know, fairly uncomplicated and very predictable. So most women in their 20s will have a period that, you know, follows the moon, that is, you know, around 28 days apart, and you know, tends to be less eventful. The problem is that most women in their 20s that I know are on hormonal birth control pills, so they're not really in tune with their cycles in the same way that they could be when they're at their sort of hormonal peak. And that, you know, seems to be a cultural norm across the board, is most women in their 20s who I speak with are, you know, still on the pill. Mm-hmm. In the 30s, you know, up to about mid-30s, things don't shift too much, but mid-30s onwards, we start to get some changes in the cycles. They might start coming a little bit closer together. So in the 30s might be coming every 27 to 28 days. Progesterone levels start declining by the late 30s, so we get more exaggerated PMS. And, you know, estrogen levels, depending on, you know, weight and blood sugar and stress levels, might actually start to climb. So we get a bit more exaggeration in the cycle, but fertility is pretty similar, and the patterns will be fairly similar as in the 20s. In the 40s, most women do experience a bit more of a dramatic shift in their cycles, and that largely has to do with progesterone dropping. And that creates a relative estrogen dominance, which makes a lot of our hormonal fluctuations through the month more noticeable. And that's honestly what's got me into sharing this work, is, you know, being, you know, mid to late 40s myself. And, you know, in perimenopause, these patterns, you can't miss them anymore. You know, the good days, the bad days, the challenges, the struggles, like they're really, really noticeable. You know, and the gifts are even bigger as well. So I certainly can't negate that. You know, but the swings are certainly more noticeable. So that typically happens in the 40s, and, you know, late 40s, a lot of women go through what's called the estrogen storm, where their estrogen actually gets very high in addition to this low progesterone, which can create a lot of chaos with, you know, heavy, difficult periods and fibroids and that type of thing. And then, somewhere early 50s, most women will start to approach menopause, where periods get, less frequent, estrogen levels start to fluctuate and then decline. And the dramatic cyclical nature of the cycles, tends to stop. But again, as I said before, I do think we still cycle. Maybe not as dramatically, but it's our wiring. So that's a quick summary. There's a lot more to it, and I've written a lot of blog posts on this, how hormones change through different decades, because people find it really interesting, because they wonder, like, why did this shift in my 30s? Yeah.
And I think like we said at the beginning of the conversation, I think it is such an important conversation that we start having. That, we take hormones from simply a period focus and a contraception focus, of fertility focus, and we start looking at it as being a life focus. Because even, and again, sort of coming back to the mindset state of place, there will be times in your cycle when you will find meditation easier and more beneficial than you will at other points of the month. And I know when it comes to mindfulness, we're taught, again, from the man's framework of, meditate every single day, or do mindfulness every single day. And, when that negative head talk comes up, address it immediately with something positive. But when we look at it from a female's point of view, there will be parts in your month when meditating is just not going to be an easy thing for you to do, because your mind is not at that point where it can switch off. It's designed to be in its peak performance period. And then again, there will be times in your month where negativity is going to be louder than positivity. So if you're trying to force mindfulness down your throat and just, negate the negative with a positive thought, you're going to end up feeling even worse than you did before, because you're not going to believe the positive things that you're trying to tell yourself. So the point of this conversation, I guess, is just to get you as a woman really aware that you will have ebbs and flows your entire life, from the moment that puberty kicks into gear until the day we die. Your female brain is designed to cycle, and your hormones are going to be a part of what causes that cycle to happen. So I know you've got some really, and I am so bloody excited about this. I truly believe that we need, as women, we need more guidance in how to track and how to run our lives in accordance with the cycle. And there are books out there you can read, there's DIY stuff that you can do. But like Shawna has said, it's such an individual journey for every one of us. There is no cookie cutter, this is what a cycle looks like for every woman. So Shawna, you have created an online program to help women to better understand their personal hormone cycle. Can you please share with us some information about that program that you've put together? Because I truly believe it is something that every single woman on the face of the planet needs to have access to.
Yeah, thank you. So I've... Oh,
and what's happened?
Have you lost
me? We lost you, but you're back.
Okay, strange. I've just created a program that's called Your Personal Cycle Blueprint, and it's an online program so that you can start it and work through it at your own pace. And basically it's a 6-week program where I will be teaching, number one, how does your body work and what's going on with your hormones? Because I just feel like we're so uneducated about this until we want to have babies or have fertility issues. So number one, I'm going to make it as fun as possible, but just to understand like what's going on inside, because it will make the tracking make more sense. And then we're going to track a full cycle together. And from a perspective of understanding what's going on physically in your body, so what's happening with the hormones, how that influences your mood, emotions, your physical state, your athletic performance, and all of that, and looking for the patterns. So I will give you some ideas of what typical patterns are in each of the phases, but my biggest premise here is that your pattern might be different than mine, and that depends on on our upbringing and ancestry and what we focus on. And then looking at what practices you can do to, again, embrace the positive and navigate the negative. So again, we're tracking a full cycle together and learning how to do this in an empowering way. And then the 6th week of the program is putting it all together. So keeping the tracking going, learning how to predict your patterns, and how to use what you've learned to transform your life. Throughout the 6 weeks, I will be giving some tips on troubleshooting, meaning, what's within the realm of a typical female cycle and what could use some support or might be a sign of hormone imbalance. Now, I won't be getting into too much of the details other than lifestyle factors like, how to eat or move or sleep or reduce stress to manage them. But really, it's about creating your own blueprint for the rest of your life and learning how to adapt that as your body goes through different phases or life cycles. So,
if there was someone who is on the pill, they don't really see the cycle as being something that is important because they pop a pill every day and therefore they don't get a period. Why would someone who doesn't experience periods, so even whether they're on the pill or whether they've gone through menopause, why would someone like that want or benefit from having a program like this?
So if they're on the pill, I actually have a recommendation in the program to, number one, sync your cycle to the moon. So if you are getting even a pill withdrawal bleed, I believe that will help you to feel more in balance. And then you can track from there, because even on an oral contraceptive, you are getting some degree of hormone swing on the week that you stop taking the pill. And some of them are biphasic or triphasic in the hormone dosing. So you still will be noticing some patterns to track. And if you're post-menopause as well, you could learn again how to watch your own body change and cycle using the lunar cycle. And I give people instructions and options with how to identify with either the full or the new moon as the start of the cycle and then watch their patterns through there, because chances are, no matter who you are and whether you've got a regular period or not, you notice that you're not the same every month and you probably beat yourself up about it. And the whole point of this is to learn what your own predictable pattern is so that you can use it to your advantage with a whole lot of self-compassion.
Yep. Because it really is about getting you as an individual woman to be completely aware of how you can optimize your life, how you can optimize your day in alignment with how you naturally operate from a hormonal standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I've spoken with women who, plan public speaking on certain dates of their cycle because they know it, like it just flows and it's easy. And who, deliberately take days off, at certain points of their cycle, when and if they can, or at least cut down on their responsibilities and duties for other people, just because it will give you so much more ease. So knowing yourself, like this is just something we should have been taught decades ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And this is really cool as well. If you're a woman who experiences guilt, which, let's be real, most women experience guilt. The one thing that I absolutely love about you recognizing your highs and lows of your cycle is that when you're at your low point where you need to give yourself some downtime, you can do that without the need to go into guilt drive. Because when you start looking at it from, this is what my body needs. And, if we go back, years and years ago, and particularly into, outside of Western culture where things are a little more organic, when women do have their periods or when they are at that nurture cycle of their month, they send them out of the tribe into the red tent and they just chill out for 3 or 4 days while they're going in that space, because they are aware that when a woman is honouring her body, when a woman is honouring the fact that she needs to reset, she needs the downtime, she needs to nourish herself, she can then come back and be a more active and productive member of the community outside of that zone. So in modern life, when you can recognise, regardless of whether or not you have a period, when you can recognise when your low points are, and you can use that as a time to say, hey, this is my downtime. Yes, I will still, you can't completely check out of life, but you can, like you say, limit your responsibilities or limit your obligations, rather than then going into that whole, I should be doing this and I should be doing that, I should be more productive at work. You can trust the fact that once this cycle is out of its way, once that downtime is out of its way, you're going to come into a more productive zone, and the time that you've taken down for those few days is going to be made up later. So you begin to trust yourself more. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Knowing that the low phases will pass is huge, no matter what they are.
It's really good for, for employees even to know if you employ a woman, if you can recognize that when she has a couple of down days, if you actually honor that and allow her to just do what she needs to do at that time, she's going to make up for it. She's going to be so much more productive. She's going to be so much more confident, so much more happy at the other part of her cycle when she's switched on. Instead of feeling like we have to perform to the standards that we're just not designed to do. We are not designed to be switched on 5 days a week, every single week.
So No. I know I personally make up for more than a week's worth of work in my productive window.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When you're tapped into it, you just get stuff done. And then there's other days where you really need to rest. I mean, that just got me thinking about, I treat a lot of women with menstrual migraines, and, on one level, that's probably just their body saying, okay, and you need to rest now.
Yes. Stop.
Stop. Yeah,
definitely. So I'm going to share, I hope this works. I've just shared the link to Shawna's online program. Now, the reason that I am supporting this program is because, firstly, it's online. So regardless of where you are in the world, and I know we've got people watching at the moment from Canada, America, Western Australia, Eastern Australia. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you have been intrigued by the idea of understanding your cycle more, of being able to optimize your life so that you're running in alignment with your ebbs and your flows, you're not beating yourself up when you're having your down few days, you just know that you're going to make up for it, like Shawna says, in the productive zone. If you're intrigued by it, I truly cannot encourage you enough to check out this link. And again, I'll pop it into the comments as well at some point when I work out how to do that, so you can just copy and paste it. I don't know how this works, but I will update it so you get access to it, because, particularly for women that I've worked with in the past, I introduce the concept of cycle tracking, and I introduce the importance of really running in alignment with your program, but I scratch the surface. And Shawna is going to take you deeper, and you're going to understand yourself so much better. Now, the benefit of doing that, not just from the hormonal point of view, is also in alignment with your head talk, with your emotional state. Because again, there are going to be points in your cycle when your negativity, whether it's your emotions or your head talk, they're going to be impacted by your hormone cycle. And when you know where your hormone cycle is at, I know for me, I get overwhelmed every month. There's a 2-day pocket just before my period comes, so in my PMS point, where overwhelm is such an easy state for me to go into. And I used to beat myself up and go, oh my God, I can't handle life. And, I'm such a failure at this point in time. Now I look at it and I go, shit, I'm overwhelmed. Oh, we know what's happening. We know what's around the corner. So rather than getting caught up in the overwhelm, I look at it and go, all right, what's going on in my life right now that's causing overwhelm? What can I change? What can I focus on? And secondly, what's my hormones telling me about overwhelm? How do I need to honor this point of where I'm at as a woman so that the overwhelm is no longer the consuming distraction? So knowing and recognizing your hormone cycle in conjunction with your head talk cycle and your emotional cycle, it's going to help you to be so much more self-compassionate. So does anyone have any questions for Shawna while we still have her online? This is that silent point where everyone just...
silent part, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing my program. I'm super excited. It's actually starting on May 22nd, but I'm taking enrollments already. And the link that you shared, you can sign up right away, and all the material, comes into your inbox on May 22nd.
So only a couple of weeks away.
Yeah, 2 weeks from today, I think. Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Shawna, I want to thank you so much for sharing your program. I want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. Is there going to be a private Facebook group connected to your program?
Yes, there will be. Yeah.
Maggie, yes, there will be. Because it's also super important, because particularly as you are becoming aware of what your cycle looks like, to know that there is access to women or a woman, the guru of hormones, that you can. Can I just tell you something, everyone? Shawna refers to herself as the Hormone Detective, which I absolutely love. And if you've not owned that right now, Shawna, I've just dumped it on you. So you're now going to own the Hormone Detective. So to be going through a program like this where you're getting to recognise what your cycle looks like, to have access to the Hormone Detective, to Dr Shawna Darou, who is wise beyond, the standard surface level of your hormones, is going to help. It gives you that, that point of reference, that point of contact for when you have questions. And the other thing that I really love about having communities like this is, as women, when we're a part of a group where we're all recognising our hormone swings, when we're all starting to get familiar with what our hormone looks like, regardless of where your life cycle fits into, it all of a sudden shifts the perspective of, I'm here on my own. This is something that I've got to be ashamed of, or this conversation of hormones is taboo, so I can't actually publicly start talking about it. In a closed Facebook group, you've got that safe space to be able to band together. And the more we as women band together and have these conversations, the more normal it's going to become. So, fantastic. Gwen's just saying she loves the Hormone Detective, and Maggie's just gone, #Hormone Detective. So
it's my new hashtag.
That's your new hashtag. Oh, so Shawna, thank you so much for joining me today. For everybody who has watched our little conversation, thank you. This is something that I would love to do more often, and hopefully I'm going to be able to work out how to do this so we can actually save this conversation and connect it to Only BS, the podcast, as an episode. And I know that Shawna also has a podcast that you share with Maggie Chilton, who is online, called, the Perimenopause something, isn't it?
The Ultimate Perimenopause Podcast.
Yes, and it is a fantastic podcast. I've listened to a number of episodes. They've had an amazing number of downloads. I am so, so proud of what you girls are doing with this podcast. So, check that out as well. And again, we'll include the links for how you can keep in touch with Shawna. I'll include the link for the program so you can jump right on board when you're ready. I would encourage you to invest in this. I truly believe that you understanding your cycle is going to give you the upper hand on your life in a lot of areas. So, yes, thank you everyone for joining us. And hopefully this will be the first of many live interviews that we also, bring to each other's tribes, so that you can understand what is available to you to support your overall holistic well-being. So thank you, Shawna.
Thank you so much. This was a blast.
And I know it's getting Monday evening over there, nearly 8 o'clock.
Almost 8 o'clock. Sun's starting to set. Yeah.
You can see it's coming through the window. It looks beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining. And we're gonna talk and jump on board on this program. I promise you, it's going to be an investment that you're absolutely not going to regret one little bit. So,
thanks so much.
Fabulous. See you, everyone.
Okay. Bye.